intentional destruction of a group as such is rarely a single act. It unfolds piece by piece, decade by decade, crime after crime. And the ongoing genocide in Palestine, visible in the totality of Israeli crimes against the totality of Palestinians across the totality of the lands slated for annexation, has been meticulously prepared over decades and enabled by long-standing violations, impunity, and international complicity. Genocide, it seems, is the dormant gene of an apartheid regime rooted in settler colonialism. But apocalypse, deriving from the Greek apokalypsis, originally means to reveal, to uncover. And the current moment is fundamentally one of profound revelation, of truth, of reality beyond ordinary perception. The sacrifice of Gaza happening under our watch forces us to confront the system we live in, the horrid, brutal reality we are all part of, the truth of who we are as individuals, as communities, as states, as institutions, and compels us to choose between courage through principles or cowardice through acceptance. And these are some of the lessons of this revelation. First, the genocide in Palestine has pierced the veil of Maya, showing the underlying geopolitical calculation of the world's most powerful nations. As I came to realize, studying the maps of Greater Israel, stretching from the Nile to the Euphrates, a vision that many Israeli leaders shamelessly brandish in international fora, the occupation of Palestine must be understood as part of a broader project of domination. This is not merely about physical borders of historical Palestine. It is a systematic assertion of permanent supremacy that knows no border. One people controlling land, resources, and the very existence of another or others, often without needing full physical presence or formal annexation. Palestinians are brutalized, dispossessed, and yet they resist. The defiance is why they remain the thorn in the side, not only of an occupying power, but of a wider system where Israel acts together with and often as a proxy of the United States, destabilizing the region to weaken societies and making them easier to dominate. This project is already happening. And the worsened conflicts that have been brought by the United States, its Western allies, and some Arab allies against the peoples in the region speak to that. Palestine's struggle is the stubborn heartbeat of a region fighting for its soul, and the resistance that refuses to be tamed. Second, the Gaza genocide has turned Palestine as the epicenter of global reckoning, exposing how racial, colonial, capitalistic structures make war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide a profitable business. This resonates with the experience of colonized populations worldwide for centuries. For generations, Palestinians have been turned into a testing ground for weapons and surveillance techniques, providing boundless supply and demand, little oversight, and zero accountability. Too many influential corporate entities have profited freely. And this explains how, while Palestinians have been killed and maimed in the thousands every fortnight for the past 2 years, Tel Aviv Stock Exchange kept soaring, growing of 213% and amassing $226 billion in market gains only in the first 18 months of the genocide. And companies have turned over near-record profits by equipping Israel with cutting-edge weaponry that has obliterated virtually the defenseless population in Gaza. Tech companies continue to provide dual-use infrastructure that enables mass targeting and mass killing. The machinery of global construction giants is razing Gaza to the ground. Major international banks have underwritten and purchased Israeli treasury bonds, financing the devastation, even as deficit grew and credit ratings fell. This is no ordinary occupation sustained by exploitation. This is a long-standing economy of occupation which has turned genocidal. And third, the meaning of what this genocide means for all of us, for our collective understanding of politics, of solidarity, of humanity. Today we know Gaza, we see Gaza. Hospitals bombed, parents gathering the limbs of their children, journalists and medics torn apart. This horror is visible to us in real time, on our phones, all day long, if we dare to look. But this is also bringing social and political awakening everywhere. It is shaping the conscience, especially of the new generations. Not long ago, my sister in arms from South Africa, Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng, the United Nations Special Rapporteur, Ciao, Tlaleng. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on the right to health told me, the wounds inflicted on the innocent ripple through every nation's soul. She was reflecting on the children from Gaza with me, but from her own experience of a child of apartheid South Africa. And this is true for every young soul beyond Gaza. For the youngest in this hyper-connected world, this genocide is not history, but memory in the making. Those in Europe will not have the distance that my generation had reading about the Holocaust and excuse of ignorance, as some did during the Rwanda genocide or the genocide in Bosnia. Or, as we in the West have done, cocooning ourselves into collective amnesia vis-à-vis our history.
Was, of course, an audio clip from Francesca Albanese's speech for the Nelson Mandela Foundation on the 25th of October 2025. It was, in fact, the Nelson Mandela annual lecture. The speech was titled, "This is a Textbook Case of Genocide." Francesca Albanese, of course, for those who don't know, is the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Occupied Palestinian Territories. Of course, you know, her work has been incredibly courageous over the last few years, and in particular, over the last 2 years during the genocide in Gaza. And I think there are a few really interesting things to reflect on. Of course, the first being her statement that the genocide is forcing us to confront the system that we live in, and the fact that you know, in many ways, the whole world is complicit in the genocide, even if unwilling. And so, for example, she mentions that part of, you know, this genocide is the process of making societies easier to dominate. Of course, the kind of hard edge of that is, you know, when you have a militarized occupation and apartheid policies, and, you know, bombs dropping over your head as they are in Gaza. But of course, there's another side to that as well, which is you know, generating comfort for people who aren't immediately experiencing that, and so you know, causing people to kind of retreat to the comfort of their daily lives in a way where that becomes almost addictive, and it becomes very terrifying to confront the reality of dealing with you know, this oppression on this scale. Of course, the another really important thing that she says, of course, is that Palestine is the epicenter of global reckoning, and of course that's very true. The president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, who you know, demanded an immediate halt of coal exports to Israel back when Colombia was Israel's main supplier of coal, said to us that you know, what's happening in Gaza and in Palestine more broadly is a warning for the global South, that this is a new method of engagement, that if countries in the global South don't fall in line, you know, this is what they could possibly experience, given the lack of pushback really from the most powerful states in the world. Of course, the main one among them, the United States of America, under Biden previously, and today under Trump. Um, and of course, I guess it's relevant to point out when we talk about complicity that when Gustavo Petro demanded that his country stop exporting coal to Israel and stop being the number one supplier of coal, the country that then took Colombia's place as the number one supplier of coal was actually South Africa. And so that's something, I guess, for us to reflect upon over here, and to question, the amount of pressure that's put on companies in South Africa and the state to stop literally fueling genocide. um there's a lot more that I can say, of course, about this. Palestine as well, when we come to this idea of Palestine as being the center of epicenter of global reckoning, to use uh Francesca Albanese's terms. Palestine, the occupation of Palestine, the colonization of Palestine, the creation of Israel was so fundamental to so many processes of controlling populations that we saw after World War II. Many people talk about the period after World War II as being one of decolonization, but of course, Israel appears during that period as kind of like the flagship colonial project, and it remains today as almost like a blueprint for other countries that want to continue to carry out colonial projects. So, for example, India and Kashmir, I mean, being the very obvious one. Um, Narendra Modi was in visiting Netanyahu earlier in Ramadan, where he said, of course, Israel is the fatherland and India is the motherland, and then had this really smug expression on his face as he was saying that, as if he had said something super profound. But all he really told us is that colonial states learn from one another, and then of course states that want to control populations and institute repression learn from colonial states, because that's been the kind of process of how colonial tactics move, even before the creation of Israel. If we go back even hundreds of years to the British colonization of Australia, the idea of like land as commodity, of course, in Poetry Corner we talked about the importance of not thinking of land as commodity and thinking about it as this living thing that we have to have an active relationship with, does emerge from that, where the concept of land title and deeds and all that kind of become a thing in countries where you have certain types of legal systems based on that of the UK. And so, to some degree, South Africa is one of those. India is one of those. There are so many around the world. Finally, I think something really important to reflect upon is that um, genocide is profitable, and another kind of thing to kind of build onto that as well is Francesca Albanese's statement that genocide is not history, it's memory in the making. And of course, she says that in response to comments that she had been told by Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng, a very well-known South African physician, another UN Special Rapporteur. And so, reflecting on Gaza from South Africa as well is particularly poignant and particularly relevant, given the fact that not only has Israel learned from apartheid South Africa, but actually, the first person to refer to Israel as an apartheid state was actually the architect of apartheid in South Africa, as a compliment, because of course these processes were kind of mutually created, and of course Israel was one of the largest suppliers of military technology to the apartheid regime back then. And so, with that, I will end these reflections, and we will move on to our next guest after this very short break.